Good morning. This roundtable hearing conducted by the Committee on Economic Development, Agriculture, Maritime Transportation, Power and Energy Utilities and Emergency Response is now called to order at 9:01 a.m. Notice of the hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets via electronic mail on October 3rd of 2019, with a second notice provided on October 8th of 2019. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the Guam Legislature's website. And now the purpose for today's roundtable hearing is for the committee to hear from professionals in the renewable energy industry on Guam about the different types of renewable energy available on Guam and about the technology, the challenges and issues of renewable energy production and the future of renewable energy on Guam with the industry professionals. So with that, I'd like to recognize and welcome my colleagues who've joined us today, Senator Amanda Shelton, Senator Will Castro, and Senator Tello Taitigui. Thank you for joining us this morning. And with that, I'd like to invite up members of the renewable industry who have joined us today. Let me see what names have signed up. Lynn Scott from GESI, as well as Joe Rosario, Jeff Walcolo from MRE, Mr. Bill Hagan from Pacific Solar, and any other members of the renewable industry who would like to join us. I'd also like to recognize members of the CCU who are present, as well as the Guam Power Authority. Thank you for joining us today. Now, I appreciate your attendance, and of course, you're more than welcome to join us today. If there's anything you'd like to add to the discussion, you're more than welcome. The discussion is going to be focused and centered on hearing from the renewable industry about some of the technology they have available currently, and what are the challenges that they have in the renewable industry, and perhaps where they see the renewable industry headed in the next 5 to 10 years.
Could we ask if John can come from the GP?
Sure.
Questions that we might have on his end.
Sure. Mr. Benevenci, would you like to join us as well? Yes.
Just in case there's any questions.
All right, and with that, I'd like to start over to my left with Mr. Scott. If you could begin, turn on your mic by introducing yourself and the company you represent.
Hi, I'm Lynn Scott. Oh, can everybody hear me? Okay. I'm Lynn Scott, owner and partner for Green Energy Solutions, also known as GESI. We've been doing renewable energy and energy conservation for the last 10 years on Guam. And we're primarily focused on energy conservation as opposed to energy production. So.
Thank you. Mr. Hagan?
My name is Bill Hagan. I'm with Pacific Solar and Photovoltaics. We installed Guam's first net metering project in February of 2009. Since then, we've installed a number of homeowners. We're doing work for the Air Force, the Navy, the Army National Guard. We're doing work for Public Works, and looking forward to more.
Thank you. Mr. Benevenci? Just for the record. Thanks.
Yes, sorry, good morning. John Beneventi, General Manager, Guam Power Authority.
Thank you.
Buenas and good morning. My name is Joe Rosario with Micronesia Renewable Energy. I've been in the renewable energy industry basically since it started. My company back in 2007 built the Navy's first renewable energy system. It's on BEQ 1 and 2, and today it still produces electricity, and everything is going well with that system. Now with the MRE, since the inception in 2012, to this day we have about, I want to say, almost 12 megawatts installed throughout the island. We also have offices in Saipan and in Pohnpei.
Good morning, Senators. Jeff Ficolo, Chief Operations Officer for Micronesia Renewable Energy. As Joe Rosario stated, we're a solar energy developer and EPC contractor. And we've been doing work here in Guam since 2012. I personally have been in the renewable energy industry for 27 years, in the electrical contracting, generation, and engineering industry for 42. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the first question I have, and I guess anyone can just sort of chime in if they have the answer. My first question to you members is, what kind of renewable technologies are you aware of that currently exist on Guam? Mr. Hagan?
Solar is the big one, whether it's for hot water, which is on the conservation side, or for the generation of power. And, our shortages in terms of technology is in battery storage. We don't have it yet. It's coming. I would imagine that I was reading something this morning that it took 10 years to transition from horses to cars, from 2003 to 2013. 10 years, and that was 100 years ago. So once the battery storage technology comes along, it will take over.
What do you guys think are what kind of renewable technologies do you guys see as the most feasible for the island? Of course, you guys are all going to say solar. You guys are all solar companies.
I'll take that first if you want. So, I mean, right now, it's definitely solar. Wind is not feasible here on Guam. In some of the prior bids that came out, there really wasn't a wind component to any developer that actually bid those projects. It was mostly solar and energy storage. We're doing energy storage right now, batteries. We have the LG Chem solution and the Tesla solution. Battery storage has came a long way in the last 4 years. It's here, it's now. In Saipan, we just had the last typhoon just blow through. We have about 27 customers that benefited from energy storage at the distributed generation level, which is the residential level. So they're pretty happy customers, and right now the prediction for energy storage over the next 2 to 3 years is price is going to come down 60%, efficiencies will go up 40%. So as Mr. Hagan stated, it's an evolving technology. We're in an evolving industry, of course, but at the residential distributed energy generation level, we're here. Energy storage is now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Ridgell, let me add a little bit to this, only because, right, there's really two different types of companies sitting at the table. One is a power generation, two of them are power generation companies, and we're an energy conservation company, okay? And I want to make sure that that's brought into the record, because the results of energy conservation from a cost effectiveness, which was the question, right? Lighting, air conditioning are the two major components in energy consumption right now, and the technology within those two fields are allowing us to produce savings for businesses and residential customers upwards of 85%. So energy conservation from a cost-effective standpoint is like, for every $1 you spend on generating power, you can spend 25 cents and outproduce the solar. So primarily, you need to conserve before you produce, right? If you're wasting a whole bunch of energy and then just producing to cover the wasted energy, doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Thank you. Great point. Thank you for that. Mr. Beneventi, are there any other renewable technologies you're aware of on Guam? I know GPA did have a pilot project for wind. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, we have a pilot project at Windward Hills, and that's a 265 kilowatt, less than a megawatt machine. And actually, we received a $2 million grant from the Department of Energy for Energy or Interior for that machine. Initially, when we looked at it, it wasn't economically feasible, but then, pursuing the grant, we did receive it, and it's up there. And what it's really doing now is just gathering a lot of information for us. We did have one contract for about 5 megawatts of renewables wind, and that contract actually kind of defunct. It was part of the phase 1 bid, the 25 NRG bid. So again, like was mentioned earlier, wind is still not there for us, and the data we will receive really doesn't indicate yet because of the inconsistency of the wind generation. Other renewables, one of the other bids that came in was for geothermal, and that was really just to dig and try and find an energy source. And they came in like 24 cents a kilowatt hour, which was prohibitive. And so in that respect, we canceled that, and we're looking at maybe perhaps some grant to see whether we could dig and find some kind of energy source at a reasonable depth. The third, waste to energy is another one, although some may say it's not clean or all of that, but waste to energy will provide about 3% of Guam's energy on a base load basis, and that would take care, of course, you offset the total cost, because right now it's landfill. Every so many years we have to spend millions of dollars on a landfill. So again, waste to energy is one component, and quite feasible actually. It's just, again, we have some challenges here in the island on that issue. Other than that, there's really, nothing that's come forward yet that we can depend on as, and again, mentioned for production of reliable energy. I totally agree with the conservation and efficiencies really is the most cost-effective and the first one. And that's what we've been trying to do we provided almost $4 million in rebates now for air conditioning. Because if you reduce your consumption, that's a total year-long reduction of consumption. So again, it lowers the cost of the ratepayer. At the same time, it doesn't degrade their quality of life. It just provides more efficient equipment to handle. So to me, that's a program that we consistently support, and really should be the first program, in my opinion. Then we work on supplying, because we supply what the customers, how much energy the customer wants, no? So, but there are ways to reduce that.
Could you tell me a little bit more about geothermal and what you guys know about it? Because I do have a particular constituent who emails me quite regularly about geothermal and has asked me a lot of questions about geothermal, and I really don't know much about geothermal.
In Hawaii, they do have some geothermal plant. And this is where you dig down to the core of the earth, where it's hot, there's heat. And then you use that heat to produce steam, using water to produce steam. And then that steam drives the turbine, just like our generators here, and then produces electricity. But your fuel source now is the heat sink that you find down. And of course, where Hawaii, the volcanoes are active, so they're able to get the heat sink right away. Ours.
Do we have the potential of tapping that here, or is it?
Yes,
you mentioned there was a company that they came in too high. Was that because the cost of drilling is expensive, or the technology is expensive?
That's correct. It's the drilling expense plus also the risk. There's no guarantee that they will go down.
Find anything?
Yeah.
I
and
see.
if we go down several miles to try and find it, and so at the end there might be nothing there. Yeah. So if somehow we did get a grant or something that will, determine that.
Then it might be feasible if
Yeah,
there was
it
a
might
grant
be.
to study and try to find a geothermal hotspot. Then it would be more feasible.
That's
I
correct.
see. Thank you. Did you have something, Mr. Vokola?
Yes, just to add on that too, the CNMI tried to do geothermal about 5 to 7 years ago. So a New Zealand company came in, they spent about $3 million doing some test drilling, and the contract just never went forward. So the company ended up going bankrupt. So geothermal out here, I just don't see that as a viable source of energy at all.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Benaventi, has there been any exploration for hydropower done by GPA?
Really, hydropower requires a lot of constant flowing, and so the only time we get that here is when we have the rains, and other than that. Or hydropower could occur if you have a heat sink or like a water basin that is at a high elevation. But our lakes, if you will, is Fina Lake, which is at a low elevation. So there's been talked about a similar technology to hydropower will be pump storage. Is where you pump the water from here up to a very high elevation, and then use that elevation to come down and generate energy. But again, you're using a lot of energy to pump it up and then coming down. So the economics of that is still is not there. So there are what you call micro turbine type technologies. One case in point is in the future we're going to look at the wastewater coming down from the northern wastewater treatment plant down to the bottom. That's about a 300-foot drop. Put a small micro turbine there to generate electricity. I estimated that back several years, less than 2 years ago, and that capacity could be around 250 kilowatt to 500 kilowatt. Another thing that we looked at is, and again, something we need to pursue further within the GWA system. You have locations where you pump water up the hill to get it over the hill, and then it comes down the hill to customers. Case in point is there in just above Santa Rita. To get from the top of the, forgot what's the name of the location there, the top of Windward Hills down towards the bottom of Santa Rita, that's a big drop also. So you can put micro turbines that doesn't impact the potable water and generate some electricity. So those are, some small things that could happen throughout the island as we pursue more and more renewables. No?
And then you mentioned receiving some kind of federal funding for the wind turbines for that study. Have you received any other federal fundings, perhaps from U.S. Department of Energy, that has gone to any other renewable studies?
No, but we have been assisting like DPW and others when they go in to try and get solar PV. So we've been assisting them doing that. The Department of Energy also, to get into renewables and all of this, you really have to put the infrastructure in. And part of the infrastructure really was the smart grid system, the smart meters, all of this. So back in the 2011, 2012, there was a $32 million project that we underwent to put in the metering and the grid infrastructure. DOE at the time paid half of that. So that was a $16 million grant provided to us. GPA provided the other $16 million. And so that's why we're here today. That's why we could do net metering, where we can calculate in and out what's coming from the meters. We can, all the benefits where you can get on the line and look at your consumption to see whether your efficiency is working and all of that. So that was the first step, the smart grid, the $32 million project, then the DOE $2 million project. And we're doing that on Department of Agriculture land in Cotao, because that's one of the best areas that we determine for wind conditions. So again, down the road, potentially there could be more there, but again, the data has to tell us how do we get it done, or we get more grants or something like that.
Senator Teddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, what is the percentage of power currently generated by GPA that comes from renewable energy?
The total on the island from GPA and the solar roof, the net metering, is close to 5% of our energy sales.
And John, how many GPA subscribers are connected to the renewable energy system? And is GPA aware of how many subscribers are off-grid, no longer dependent on GPA?
I don't think there's any customer off the grid. There are 2,000 customers that are supplying about or providing themselves or part to the grid. about 22,000 kilowatts, no? So there's 2,000 of net metering customers that we have today. We have 52,000 customers, so there are 50,000 customers with, that are don't have their own contracts for net metering, and we supply all the energy to. No?
I'm sorry, do those numbers again, John, because, so the first question is connected to renewable energy system. How many of your subscribers do you think you have that is connected to this renewable energy system? Like
There's
the net meter?
2,000 net metering customers, NEM we call them,
Okay,
and they're connected to the grid and generate their electricity, and then, back and forth. We store the energy during the daytime, and then they use at night.
and you have 52 subscribers to GPA right now?
How many?
52,000?
Yeah, 52,000 customers.
Okay. With the new power plant in Dedido, can you tell me how will the renewable energy programs be integrated with the new proposed Dedido power plant?
Right now, we have several contracts that we have already signed that will bring our renewable energy to about 25% in 2022. We have the KEPCO for 60 megawatts, Hanwha for 60 megawatts, and then we have a bid out that we are going through the process now for another 40 megawatt. So that, together with what's there today, including the net metering, 25% of the energy on Guam in 2022 will come from renewables, mainly solar PV.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Benavente, I just want to know if there's a possibility down the line for this proposed power plant to increase the renewable energy capacity.
The plan right now is to move towards a target of 50%. And thank you, we support totally your bill towards a 50% ratio. And how is that going to happen? It has to happen with the new power plant that we put together. Because as we had shown, the other power plants cannot work well with renewable. The new power plant works very well with renewables and will provide the reserve requirement for solar PV that it does not have. So therefore, right now, as I mentioned, we have 25% in 2022. And once the new power plant is approved, we're going to upgrade our integrated resource plan and get that approved to proceed towards 50% over the early part of 2020. So it could be as early as next year or the year after. We're pursuing already beyond 25% because it takes about 18 months to get a contract and about 2 to 3 years to construct. So the lag time between here to getting the renewable energy is about 4 to 5 years. So again, that's the process. Now, there's one big thing that we have to, there's a big difference between the conventional unit and the solar PV. And that's why we always say supplemental at this point. And yes, it could provide 24/7 energy. However, for how long is the question, no? The longer you store, the more batteries you have, the more costly it becomes to provide that 24/7 energy, consistent at least with the conventional energy or the type of reliability that you have today. So, I just like to add, and again, first of all, we're really very GPA supports and have been consistently facilitating and pursuing renewable energy. Case in point, the net metering customers, we have not turned anyone away. We've worked with them to facilitate this, no? So we have 2,000 customers, 22. I don't think any of them could say, and I want to know otherwise, no, that we have held anybody back in pursuing that, no? And then we've been pursuing, because as you can see, we're going to have 25% by 2022. But to go beyond that, we need to, there's a paradigm shift from the way we generate energy to keep the remaining 75%, and then eventually we get to 50% renewable, the remaining 50%, and so far down the line to keep reliable power going over the next 10 to 20 years as you try to achieve, if that's the policy, 100% renewable. So I offer this, I looked through the past 2 months, August through October 7. The top, above the red line is really what you expect the machine to do. Anything below the red line means for that day, it did not produce enough energy to meet its needs. And this is a model consistent throughout the whole organization. So if you look at this is about 67 days, and only 11 days in the past 67 days did renewable achieve its intention. No? I think it's no fault of their own except it's the weather. No? And here in Guam, you can expect this. I can go back further and we can go further. This will even get worse. Because for renewable energy to achieve its goal, they need to produce about 25%. It can only produce 25% of its capacity for the whole year. You know what I mean? So, like a 200 megawatt machine can produce 200 megawatts 24 hours a day for a total of 96, 98% of the year. For 200 megawatt solar PV, at best, they can produce that for only 25% of the year. So even to get equivalent to the new machine, you need 800 megawatts of solar to compare with the 200 megawatt machine. But let me give you an idea what this means, because I haven't seen, I tried to pull out a number to try and give an estimate, because I think that's where we need, it's kind of missing at this point.
Okay, Mr. Benavente,
So-
sorry, I just want to keep the roundtable on track. It's not the purpose of the roundtable is not to discuss the power plant. I know my colleagues had questions, but I appreciate the information you're sharing. Really, the purpose is to hear about current renewable technologies, what renewable capabilities are.
This is renewable technology.
What their
if I can
challenges
just,
are. Correct.
Senator, if I just finish, because we talk about batteries, right? So the question is, how much batteries do you need to try and come up? I won't mention the power plant anymore. I'll just talk about renewables.
It's just I want to keep the roundtable on track.
Just 2 more minutes and I'll be done. For example, if I just take the energy for 1 month needed, how much were we short? It's the equivalent of 8 days of energy. So if I take 8 days of energy, that's how much batteries I need. Just to make sure that I consistently provide you the same service today.
So how many megawatts did you need for those 8 days each day to make up for the shortage? Because it wasn't a complete dropout, it was like a percentage-wise, right?
Yeah. You need about 800 megawatts a day of capacity just to generate 1 day of energy for the island. Okay, 800 megawatts.
I thought your full capacity is 400 some megawatts.
Yeah, but that's conventional, see. The reliability of those systems is 90-some percent. Or the availability is 90-some percent. The availability of solar PV is only about 25%. So therefore, you need more capacity. So let me give you an idea for what it costs for renewables with 1 day reserve storage. Right now, for 1 day's use, no storage. The only storage you have is to catch it in the daytime and use it at night. That's the only storage, not to add any more reserve for a rainy day. My calculation on that is about 3.7 billion. No? So if you're going to have 1 additional day of storage, you need to have the capacity to generate that again. So therefore, that's 3.4 billion. And then 1 day, every day of just batteries, because now you have the capacity to generate. So you can only generate 1 battery 1 day's worth a day, but over 8 days, if you do that, it's 1.5 billion per day. So it's 8.8 billion just to get 1 day 100% renewable with 1 day reserve storage. When I look at this and it's 8 days equivalent, and I say, if I'm the power and I have to supply you 24/7, just with 8 days, which is not even equivalent to where we are today, but at least it's, so I'm looking at, I have to do about 8 days of storage supply, and that's at 10.9 billion. So therefore, you're looking now for 100% solar PV with 8 days of reserve to cover a period or similar, and again, it's right here, 19.7 billion, and that translates to an average and a kilowatt hour cost per customer per kilowatt hour that's generated to about 59 cents a kilowatt hour. Then you add the grid, because there's 7 cents for the grid without generation. You're talking about 66 cents a kilowatt hour compared with the 25 cents that it's costing us today. So the biggest thing there is the reliability. That's why we are trying to look at a hybrid. Hopefully the industry improves more so that it provides other opportunities. But the reality is battery storage still are cheap, because this cost is it used to be $1,000 a megawatt hour, I believe, $1 million a megawatt hour. This costs are at $300 a megawatt hour. So in other words, you're getting close to the bottom already of how much more cheaper battery can be, no? So that's why we have to look at this, because in Guam, reliability is quite important, no? We're all by ourselves here. So so really, all I ask is take a look at all of this as we look further into the future, because we can continue towards that goal, but in the meantime, we got to keep the energy reasonable and let technology improve, allow it to improve, no? And the
Thank you.
costs come down.
So I'd like to see
Yeah.
some of those numbers you've talked about, because I am aware of a solar contract that was just signed in California and LA that's 400 megawatts and of solar with 300 megawatts of storage, and that came out to 1.1 billion over 25 years, which is 3 times cheaper than the proposed power plant.
Yep.
But again, we're not supposed to be discussing
I
the proposed
can
power, but
provide
you're
you
taking
those
us down
things.
that route.
I can
So
provide
I do want to get back on track and focus on some of the questions we have with regards to the current renewable industry. Did you have something?
I'm actually loving the numbers because, right, I'm an energy conservation guy. So essentially what I'm hearing in this is, okay, we've got, a need or a demand on the island for somewhere around 500 megawatts, something like that, John? And you're saying that $1.9 million a day for battery storage. And that's going to take care of how many megawatts worth of power?
We're talking about 1.5 billion for 5,000 kilowatt hours energy in 1 day to store 5 million kilowatt hours, which is your daily requirement. No?
Okay. So as I sit down and I listen to the math in the numbers that he's saying, right? $19 million, okay? You can pretty close to replace every single homeowner's air conditioners for the same $19 million and get a 30% reduction in overall power. And that's sustainable, that's permanent. That's not got to buy new batteries 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's not continually spending the money. It's now energy that GPA doesn't have to produce. It's permanent, right? As opposed to continuing to spend money on storage, continuing to spend money on maintenance. I mean, you think about just the air conditioning to air condition those batteries is probably more than what the government is going to spend on their power bill. Because the batteries can't get super hot, they can't get super cold, right? They got to be in. So all we're talking about so far is let's spend money buying storage, right? Let's spend even more money to keep the storage in good shape, and let's do it every 5 years. When you can sit down and get energy conservation that exceeds what they can build and store for 40% less. and it's a one-time cost. Why continue to throw money at this? Why not solve the problem, conserve the energy? If we're at 600 megawatts, we can knock down 30% with just two simple things, lights and air cons, okay, which are very cost effective now. And we get a permanent reduction of 200 megawatts instead of going out and hiring companies to build 200 megawatts and then going out and spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on batteries every 5 years.
Thank you.
Why do it?
Senator Castro?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I appreciate bringing folks from the industry here. We have ample opportunity to ask GPA, the utilities, and other members who are well informed. So, you know, my questions are directed more for the industry. I could hope that the market forces can drive innovation and accelerate change. Joe Rosario, I've known you for a long time, so I have a couple pretty straightforward questions, and any of you can also jump in. First of all, what is the penetration rate of solar technology into the homes, into residential homes and or government? And frankly, what's taking so long? If you can just kind of limit your response to a couple minutes, because I have a follow-up question also for the utilities in terms of generation and any jeopardy for bond repayment.
So to answer your question, your first question, Senator, about penetration rate into a home, we can successfully power a home 100 to be able to compensate or to accommodate 100% of the home's electricity. So if we go to a home and we see that they have a suitable rooftop for renewable energy, we could successfully accommodate all of their energy consumption at least during the day, right?
Let me rephrase my question.
Okay.
I'm sorry. How many homes do you anticipate there are, and how many homes have adopted these technologies? And then I'd like to hear from you in a minute. So I think this is a great partnership that could forge.
Yeah, I think as Mr. John Beneventi was mentioning, it's about 2,000 homes. 2,000 homes so far, yes.
2,000 residential homes have solar energy, or there are a total of 2,000 homes?
I say of that 2,000, there are probably about 90% of them are residential.
And maybe you can help me with this. I understand Mr. Beneventi's grid and how the reliability of natural energy through the sun kind of fluctuates. Right. We saw that this past week.
Sure.
Well, what about the weekends when families are home, or when teachers are in school between the normal working hours of, let's say, 07:30 when we report to class and when we get off at 4 p.m. in the afternoon? What can the industry say about generating solar energy at a reduced rate to tackle those government entities or any other entity that conducts most of its business in the normal course of a business day?
Well, for a residential home, when the homeowner and the kids are off to school and work, I think that's where the system is very beneficial, and that's through GPA's net metering program, and that's where it works, right? Where the only thing in the home that's probably on is maybe a refrigerator, guaranteed the refrigerator and an AC. All the rest of that power has to go somewhere, and it's exported back into the grid. And through the NEM program, GPA counts that as credit and gives it the homeowner credit. So the way the system is designed, when the homeowner comes home at night and turns on all the ACs, all the credit or all the exported energy that is shoots back into the grid during the day will offset what's consumed at night. And then on the weekends, that's where they're consuming a lot of their energy.
And then my second question was, what's taking so long for adoption by homeowners or other business entities for this technology? And so you don't have to go too deep into that, because I know other senators have other questions. Mr. Scott, I appreciate you leaning in on conservation. I can only speak from personal experience changing out Dad's aircon and seeing the power bill go down by $100, which is a lot for me. But my question then, my next question is directed to the utilities. First of all, Senator Limtiaco, Senator Sanchez, thank you so much for being proactive. They reach out, Mr. Chairman, to my office very regularly, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much. My question is for Mr. Beneventi. With respect to the Navy base expanding its solar farm, do you believe that it hurts or helps the utility as far as generation, distribution, those two questions?
First of all, it could be the Navy handles actually the entire Department of Defense, which includes Anderson Air Force Base. There is some land mass that are great for renewables. The Navy could have gone out on their own to put in the renewables. But when they do that, that reduces the amount, their dependence on ourselves, and therefore they won't be, if they did that on their own, the debt that we have to pay, the full burden for the total debt that we have for the grid in the system and everything will now have to be borne by only the 52,000 customers of GPA. So I'm very happy to say that the Phase 3 project that we have going with them is really to utilize 164 acres of Navy-owned land at Naval Station and at Finnegaisen. That's going to produce 40 megawatt. That's about 40 megawatts of total capacity, or about 85 million kilowatt hours per year. That now, if it comes in at a good rate, say around 12 cents a kilowatt hours, compared to what is costing us today, about 15, it's going to save everyone, including the Navy, who's a 20% customer. So the plan is really to continue working with the Navy and having all these land areas that we could, we hope that this is just the first of the partnership so that we can, again, find more land area that we can do that, because to get to 100% renewable, it's going to take about 3,500 acres. To get to 100% renewable plus 1 day of storage is going to require 7,000 acres. So this is where land becomes an issue, and we have to maximize. No?
Unless you go rooftop solar, then the acreage is not required.
Now, let me talk about rooftops.
Real quick, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Benavente, my last question would be this. As the Department of Defense, as you referenced, and hopefully the rest of the Marianas migrates towards renewable energy, do you anticipate any impact upon GovGuam's ability to pay its bonds? Do you anticipate then any increase in future costs? I know we covered this during the bond discussion, but it's worth rehashing for a couple minutes. And I remember a model, Mr. Chairman, when MCV, and I may get the historical context wrong, but I remember when they started allowing their employees, so as not to lose jobs. I'm not in the business of cutting jobs or reducing the number of jobs, but I saw an interesting business model that the market produced. It allowed folks from cable or MCV to become almost proprietors, almost sole proprietors, to be able to maintain and install these cable systems so that they can earn money based on their own ability and desire and energy levels. One or more of your firms at the table had discussed a very similar model to migrate folks in this conventional power generation system to now become almost entrepreneurs for themselves, so they can service not just the island but the region for renewable energy. I don't know if you caught all that, but is there a way to answer that in 2 minutes or less, Mr. Benavente?
Yes, as you convert to renewable energy, there are jobs, no, that's created, and yes, there could be entrepreneurs for all these various areas. But again, in my opinion, it's not a two and away. It's a hybrid combination of the two, because solar PV cannot provide the reliability at a reasonable cost. So therefore, this is why we say supplemental energy. So you start doing more and more, like we're doing 25%, more and more other net metering or other type of services. Every time you do that, you're converting oil to jobs, and which is what we truly promote, no, and stuff. So again, that's the case. And I always like to deal with numbers. Somehow it's been my downfall, or if you will. But let's take 30,000 homes. No, I don't know. I believe there's probably 30,000 homes. And if they all could have solar PV with the adequate rooftop, what capacity is that? I calculated that to be about 200 megawatts. 200 megawatts out of the 800,000 megawatts needed for 100% reliability, like thing. So again, if every home, so therefore, it's a combination of all of this going down the road. And then the only thing that we the thing that we always looking forward is how, and again, why. Our business charter is reliable power, affordable, safe, and environmentally friendly. So this is, so we always look at the affordability of all of this, no? So that's why, again, all of these things have to compete with what is the cost of power, energy to the consumers, and try and find a way to reduce that. That's our, that's our charter. So again, that's just to add some information, Senator, as well to 30,000.
So just real quick, you said 30,000 homes you think a rooftop would generate 200 megs? Because I think you've said before that 2,000 NEM customers right now are producing 20 megs.
That's right.
So if you add that up, 2,000 equals 20 megs. I mean, that's a rough estimate, but 2,000 equals 20 megs, and that's like 20,000 homes would be 200 megs.
Yeah, but again, and just running out based on an average. So it could be, it's in
So
the
anywhere between 20,000
yeah,
and 30,000.
It's in the ballpark. The
that
point
range.
is, do we even have 30,000 homes that can accommodate this, no? And all of that, because we have 42,000 residential customers. And out of 42,000 residential customers, how many are in apartments and all of that? No, how many truly? So I don't have the home number. We're gonna just check into that. But just trying to figure out what may be the impact of, say, this type of a program versus that. That's all.
Yeah, and then you could include schools, government buildings, businesses that have large rooftops. They could add to the grid as well.
That's correct. But again, just give them the capacity.
Just to add in here, only because I brought up, you brought up the entrepreneurial side of this thing, okay? So you have a homeowner who's invested in buying a house. He has a rooftop, he's consuming power. And in a lot of cases, in some cases, they have additional space, right? But we have our limits, right? For residential, max solar PV system is 25K, but some of these rooftops are big enough to hold 30, 40, 50K. So the question then becomes is if we're looking at an entrepreneurial situation, why can't we let them do full capacity of their rooftop and then lease back the system to GPA?
I think there's some jurisdictions that are doing that, like a solar host program that they're doing in San Antonio and some other places. It's a similar kind of mechanism that you're referencing.
There's lots of systems out there. Some California has a rooftop leasing program where for big warehouses, they lease it at 75 cents a square foot of roof space, right? From there, they can sit down and the utility can then build whatever they want on top of that roof space. Well, it generates, here on Guam, if we think about doing something like that, now instead of shipping all of our money to whoever's doing whatever, gets the award for whatever system or whatever power plant, now we're using our money and keeping it here on Guam, huh? Right? We're helping homeowners that maybe they inherited a house and they're on the lower side of the income level to be able to make additional income to support their families, help kids go to school and go to college and those kinds of things, come off of some of the public assistance stuff. You look at some of the government agencies where we've got Section 8 housing and those kinds of things where we're paying massive amounts of money for less fortunate folks to have a house, and that's government funded. As we sit down and we say, well, wait a minute, there's a rooftop on a house that's owned by Gura or owned by whomever, and GPA can use that and feed the money back into the public cycle here on Guam, as opposed to, all right, let's hire some Korean company or some Japanese company or somebody else to build these giant systems, when we can actually keep our money here and help the economy.
Thanks. I'd like to recognize Mr. Ken Lianguro. Was there something you'd like to?
Just a quick question.
Okay. Before Ken, Mr. Liang, first start.
I hope you don't mind, Ken. I know you're long-winded, so this is going to just take real quick. Batteries. Maybe I missed it while the conversation was going, but my concern is batteries. Being able to store enough batteries. Is it cost-effective? Is it dangerous at this point? How much storage is needed for a home, and is it? Does the battery have to be stored in an area? You mentioned something about if it's in an air-conditioned area, it can't be hot or too cold. So is there someone, one of the private companies here can talk
I'd love to take that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So about a year ago, we became a Tesla certified installer here in Guam and as CNMI, and also LG Chem out of Korea. So these technologies now have come so far in the last 2 to 3 years, it's unbelievable. The new Tesla battery is 13.5 kilowatt hours. We're putting 2 batteries in a home. The LG Chem are 10 kilowatt hours, putting 2 batteries in a home. And right now, it's getting the homeowner through the night on the storage. Sun comes up the next day. Even on a cloudy day, you're getting solar power. Recharging that battery, and it's just a cycle through day after day after day. So, as Mr. Beneventi stated, if you took those 30,000 homes, you put them on solar with battery storage, now basically you don't need a power plant. And that's where this industry is going, and this industry is getting there quickly. So right now we're putting 2 batteries in with solar, and we're cheaper than the utility right now.
So these, okay, the storage of these batteries, there are people who are trying to figure this out, they don't have any solar because they've heard the issues on batteries, that it's not at that level yet. Number one, how much would you're saying that each 2 batteries per home?
Correct.
How much would 1 battery cost?
If you want to do it per kilowatt hour, I don't really want to state that price right now, but I can tell you that on a power purchase agreement, we're cheaper than the utility right now.
Just an estimate. So you're saying that 2 batteries are needed per home?
Yeah,
in
on
order
an
to
average
store
home.
this, and then what is the 1 cost per battery? You don't want to state the cost on that? Can't you give me an estimate?
No, I mean, I can. If you went out, I mean, we get it at the wholesale level, right? So if you buy a Tesla battery, we're about $5,000 to $6,000 per battery.
And how long would that battery last?
That battery has a 10-year warranty with a degradation point on that, but it's guaranteed through Tesla for 10 years.
10 years. And you would need about 2 batteries in order to hold all the power from
That's an
solar?
average home. That is correct, Senator.
Okay, so you're looking at about $10,000 for batteries. Every 10 years, there's a warranty. Usually things break after 10 years, but...
Correct.
So you're looking at that, and the storage on the... Since you're saying this is brand new, they've had problems with batteries exploding. Has this Tesla battery had any reviews about it exploding or had any issues?
We've had no problems with these batteries at all.
How many years?
Well, we've just started installing them. It's same with the LG Chem. We've been putting them in for about 2 years now.
2 years?
And we've had no problems with the LG Chem. They're coming out of South Korea. As we know, Tesla's coming out of the U.S.
About 2 years.
Senator, there was an article 2.5 years ago where the Tesla wall pack batteries factory actually exploded. Okay. Since then, I haven't kept up on the changes in battery technology. We pretty much stopped it as a company.
Okay.
But maybe you'll want to ask Focolo about that article.
John, do you have something to say?
Yes. Energy storage batteries at the utility scale have been having issues. The AES has explosions and fires. In other areas also the same thing. That's why there's a delay in our battery here in Guam, because they're making some changes to address prior issues, and this is what we talk about, the evolution of batteries. Things they find happen and they make it better and so and so. So again, yes, that is a concern. And then if you notice the life of the batteries, 10 years, our storage batteries that we're asking for in our contract is a life of 20 years maximum. But then the question becomes, the expected life of the solar PV and the batteries is 20 years. So when you make an investment, if you're trying to compare costs, you have to look at the life of the equipment, no? So with solar PV, you're looking 20 years. So after 20 years, if you're going to compare it, sorry, Senator, with a power plant of 40 years, so you need to spend a major portion for reinvestment after 20 years to change out the batteries, to change other things, to be able to compare the costs. See?
I see.
So that's the other thing that's missing here, reliability and life of the equipment. So when you put that all together, that's how you evaluate, we evaluate what is the best fit for the system. No?
So since you brought it up, you said the life of a power plant is about 40 years. So if you were to build this power plant, that means we could not go 100% renewable for 40 years after the construction of the power plant?
I'm sorry, can you restate the question?
So you said the average lifespan is 40 years. So my question is, does that mean then that pushes out 100% renewables 40 years at least? Because we'd have
No,
the power plant
no.
for 40 years.
No, what I'm saying is that if you don't have this power plant, you're going to push out 100% renewable for a lot longer. We need the power plant to be able to continue towards more and more renewables. And that power plant will provide the reliability, because we mentioned earlier there's 15 cents a kilowatt hour. 5 cents of that is to pay for the equipment, or 2.5 to pay for the equipment in 25 years. After 25 years, that 2.5 cents go away. You only have 2.5 cents to operate and maintain. Now the fuel oil, you don't consume unless you ask for it. So therefore, when you put in renewables and you're not consuming here, you're not expending that cost. See, that's how they work together. So again, that means that this power plant will get us, if it takes 20 years, 30, 40 to get to 100%, this is the power plant that's going to get us there. The existing,
I guess what I'm saying
ones are already 25 to 40 years old, so they'll be way past, I mean, they're not going to survive that.
Sure, but what my point is, we'd have the plant for 40 years, basically. It'd be usable
Yes.
for 40 years.
The plan will be here to sustain the island at least for the next 40 years. So that's why it's very important to have it. That's
And,
Mr.
Senator,
Vocolo?
and the only problem with that, our industry is moving so quickly with battery storage and solar energy. It's becoming so efficient that what's going to happen in 5 years, what's going to happen in 10 years with this power plant? We never argued the case with having some sort of baseload generation, but 200 megawatts, it's a stranded asset.
Okay.
And it's going to be obsolete.
Okay, so again,
Yeah.
I want to go back to the original thing, and I apologize, I chimed in because he mentioned it, so I just had a follow-up question, but I want to keep back on track with
Sorry, Senator.
just discussing about current renewable capabilities, challenges of the renewable industry, potential solutions, where the renewable industry is headed in the future.
And that brings me to the challenge section of solar energy. My concern and constituents has asked me to ask this question on regards typhoons. When these solar panels, my father has a solar panel for his water heater on top of his house. But when there is a typhoon that comes, it blows it, it destroys it, then my father has to, again, he's actually given up. I mean, climate change is amongst us and pushing out stronger storms. So how do you address this concern of our typhoons? Mr. Hagan, if you can answer that question. And by the way, Tesla, wasn't there a suit with Walmart and Amazon for batteries exploding from Tesla?
It wasn't batteries, to my knowledge. It was the EPC developer who wired the solar panels on the roof. That's what I read out of that article.
Oh, okay, thank you. Mr. Hagan, please.
Mounting on the roof can be engineered to make them typhoon-proof. We had 1,500 panels on roofs in Saipan when the typhoon hit. We lost 7 because of flying debris. The other 1,493 panels are still in place.
With our solar thermal collectors for our air cons
It's a matter of engineering
Again,
and
in Saipan.
installation.
So in other words, you're saying of how many, the number of panels that were up in Saipan during that huge storm,
We had 1,500 on several schools.
and when the storm passed, how many was left still standing?
1,493.
Wow, that's very good.
We lost 7 because the flying debris came in, hit something, and tore them off.
Wow, that's
So they
very
only lost 7 panels, is what you're saying.
good. Right, that's very good too.
Right, with the insurance companies have started to really come forward in this arena, right? So not only do you have your standard typhoon insurance, but they also have a glass policy endorsement to your standard insurance, okay? And a glass policy endorsement is the cheapest and most inexpensive way to cover those panels here locally. Premium typically runs somewhere around 1.5 or 2% add-on to your regular homeowner's insurance policy. So it's very cost effective if people will go in and look at it. So not only do we have some great engineers that have engineered systems, I know Bill's is incredible, ours is at 180 something, I think Jeff's is 180, 190, something like that, 200, right? So from the engineering standpoint, that's not the issue. The only issue really is the flying debris. And from the flying debris, we can insure that for nominal amounts of money. Local insurance are great.
Thank you. Now I'd like to allow Mr. Leon Grow. You had some testimony to provide?
Yes, I would. I've been watching the renewable situation developing here on Guam ever since I got involved with the GRRP battle, and I noticed that every couple of months a waste energy proposal comes floating out of the CCU and GPA and stuff like that. So I just want to make a couple of observations. One, on the renewable technology side, it is moving at light speed. 10 years ago, the Cadillac panel was 80 watts and it cost $1,000. Today, the Cadillac panels are pushing 750 and 800 watts, and they cost $300 or $400. They're coming out with glass windows that you can put in your house, so that, you know, so I think we need to put more emphasis on the passive types of technology, because the comments earlier about just air conditioning and lights. 7 years ago, my electric bill was between $700 and $800, and then I went to all the new equipment. My power bill dropped down to $220 to $300. Through circumstances and age, I'm in the process of changing all the technology in my house. And when I bought my 16 SEER air conditioner, everybody's like, ooh, wow, you know, how can you afford that? I've now got a 32 SEER for the same price that I paid for my 16 SEER. The same thing for my bedroom ACs. 2010 or 2011, GPA got a rate increase because the renewable market was making inroads into their revenue stream, and they had to raise rates in order to make sure they didn't go into default on their bond indentures. So that's why we need to look at putting more emphasis on this type of technology, because this is something that has a faster payback for ordinary people, number one. Number two, it's less likely to attract the carpetbaggers. And I go back to GRRP, because here we have a company that doesn't exist. There's no corporate documents, there's no business license, there's no corporate exhibit. The partnership agreement was dissolved in 2012, and yet it's still in the Superior Court of Guam with an active case of $20 million unless you senators approve an exclusive license giving them the power to control all renewable energy on the island of Guam. So we see the carpetbaggers going to be attracted to these types of large projects. I think that the approach that these business people are taking is more in line with what the people of Guam can afford. Now, we know that GPA does have to do some modifications to their power plant, but contrary to what John just said earlier, we do know that power plants blow up and catch fire. So we can't say that the batteries are less dependable than the power plants. But what we need to do is we need to approach this from a consumer level. What can the ratepayers of Guam afford? And right now, ratepayers of Guam can more easily absorb the cost of renewables than we can the cost of large-scale fixed assets. Because the large-scale fixed assets, contrary to anything we hear, are going to raise rates. I mean, on one hand, we hear that, you know, if we build this power plant, it's going to bring down the cost of producing energy, but in order to build this power plant, we're going to have to raise rates.
Okay.
So,
thank you again. Mr. Leangro, just again, I want to keep us on track. I know we keep sort of coming back to the discussions of the power plant.
I'm bringing
others
it back
have brought it up as well,
that.
so I allowed you to go ahead and finish because others have brought it up, but I do want to keep us on track and focus more on the renewable industry.
Okay, I think what we need to look at from a government policy is ways that we can support, build, and encourage renewable technology, because if we look how it has changed just over the past 10 years, where will it go if we give more support at that level? And the reason I bring that up is when I look at the Guam Energy Office, they were giving out certificates for equipment, but they wouldn't give me certificates because I wasn't replacing old technology. I was buying a new technology. So in order for me to get my $200 check, I had to bring in the air conditioner I was replacing. So, you know, there's just some wrinkles that we need to look at it from a policy point of view, to look at it from the consumer point of view. The consumer is a largely, we don't have a middle class. We have a lower middle class, upper low class population that struggles from paycheck to paycheck. How can we as a policymakers embrace the types of technologies that will allow them to have a quality of life in the most affordable way possible? And that's why I was encouraged listening to these guys talk about, because I personally experienced how just changing the technology. I remember GPA's testimony on the rate increase, and that was because people were getting too efficient. So what is going to happen if these technologies get better and better and more people start adopting them? Are we going to see rate increases again because more people aren't using the big systems? So that's why we have to work as policymakers. We need to come up with a balanced process that encourages innovation and adoption and doesn't penalize GPA at the same time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I
ahead.
just make
Sure.
one comment?
Sure.
First of all, Ken and I can agree to disagree, no? Because he uses reducing costs and then go here and there, which totally doesn't make sense to me, no? But that's okay. What I'm saying is take a look at what we put forward, which will make things affordable, not only for all the ratepayers. And secondly, for the record, GPA is the one putting out $4 million in rebates to customers to become energy efficient. So we're not trying to raise rates, we're encouraging people to spend, and we're giving them rebates to reduce their consumption. So that's for the record, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, you were mentioning, Ms. Leangro, something about, it kind of sounded like you were talking about if people start going off grid, how that might affect the power system. So I'd like to ask the members of the industry, do you foresee anytime soon with the technology that's being developed, or how soon do you see the potential for customers just going completely off grid? You guys were mentioning something, Mr. Vocolo from MRE was mentioning batteries now, the 2 Teslas, they can power their house at night and then solar energy in the daytime. How likely is it that people could start leaving the grid?
Considering the weather conditions out here, having enough battery storage in your house to go off grid forever, fairly unlikely. There are some people who just want to be independent. I mean, it's not a matter of economics, it's just, I want to be independent. And so there are people probably now who are pretty much off grid. My ranch has solar power and I'm not on grid, so it's possible. A point I'd like to make is on rooftop. I'm a big proponent of rooftop solar. If every standalone home on Guam had rooftop solar, they could be standalone, literally. In the last 10 years, our average power bill at my house has been $15 a month. Okay? My house is standalone. We don't store, we push it back on the grid, and as long as the financial arrangement works out okay, we'll stay with that. But if GPA changes the arrangement and the battery storage looks attractive, we can go off grid. But there's enough space on homeowners' roofs right now for them to literally be standalone energy free.
What about condominiums? We have quite a bit of condominiums and apartment buildings.
That's the
I don't know
problem.
about the rooftop, how much space there is to be able to generate that.
Rooftops belong to the common area, so who gets the control of that? That would be a homeowner association.
But would there be enough space? No, okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Maybe the common area, you could
Okay.
do the lights and some other stuff.
With common areas, and I'll go back to my banking days, right? I'm retired from Bank Pacific, and part of that JP Morgan Chase in Seattle, okay? But when it comes down to HOAs, right? You've got multiple floors with multiple condominiums across apartments, right? But your footprint is very small for the amount of homes and the amount of GPA customers, okay? More importantly, you've got air cons up there, you've got venting up there, you've got a whole lot of things up there. It just doesn't work out depending. Now, if it's a very small little place where there's maybe 8 or 10 or 12 or something like that apartments, you might could, right? But not on the big condos, right?
Senator, also, if I could add to that, in California, this was about 12 years ago, there was a condo association that couldn't avail to solar energy, so the tenants got together and they sued the state of California because they wanted the benefit of solar energy. So that's where the community solar program started, and that would be a great program here in Guam. Because you're right, there's a lot of people in Guam who have tin roofs, who have live in shaded areas, out in the jungle, who live in condominiums, townhouses, HOAs, where they can't avail to solar energy. So community solar program would allow them the benefit of solar energy.
To provide for the condos, the lifeline rates and all of that, that's what GPA is doing with the large-scale renewables. And really, if you compare what the costs are that are coming in, they're coming in at 8.5, then 11 cents, 12 cents a kilowatt hour compared to the LEAC. So that would help the rest that are not able to get to solar rooftops or anything. But at the same time, it has to be said that for those that are solar PV systems providing, do we realize that we're buying that power from them at 25 cents a kilowatt hour? And it only costs us 15 cents to generate that same power if we were to generate it from oil. But yet we're giving them credit for 25 cents because they're using the grid. So I'm not against solar PV, but to say that it's the savior of all of them, hold on a minute, because if they were to get the 2,000 home off the grid, I can assure you that the cost of energy for the rest of the customers will be lower. Because what is happening? They generate the power in the daytime, and then they use it at night when it's most expensive. So not only do they get the full 25 cents, but they also drive the cost up. See, so, we can show the numbers. We can work the realities, the facts of running the system, no? So that's the, I don't want anybody to think that they just go on their own, that's the cheapest way. No, in fact, the utility is the cheapest way. And we're taking care of the rest. And so if the 2,000 homes or others will want to separate, it's fine, because we will adjust to take care of the balance that are not able to provide. And we are the 25% renewable we're going to, and the 50% renewable, those are all savings that's going to go to the rest of the ratepayers. No, that's it.
But if people did leave the grid, it would end up raising rates for everyone, right? If a significant portion of people left the grid.
It's happening now. The 2,000, they're not paying much, but they're using the grid as a storage. And I can show you the numbers. They're driving the cost up in the peak time. And when they drive that, they drive the LEAC up. And what do they get credit for? The full LEAC and everything. See? So somewhere, we filed that petition with the PUC, and we continue on that docket. Somewhere down the line, we're just trying to find parity for everybody else. We're not against renewable solar PV rooftop. We'll be happy to work with them. you know? So it's not really against GPA, no, we've been facilitating this. We're just trying to keep parity of course among others, no? That's all, Senator.
Okay, thank you. All right, you have any other questions? Okay, so I have a question for members of the renewables industry. So we've talked a lot about battery storage now. We've sort of talked about that. Obviously, one of the big challenges of the renewable industry that's been brought forth, and I'm sure everyone agrees with it, is there are challenges with intermittency whenever the sun is not shining at its brightest. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about battery technology and what you guys are aware of as far as what's in the works for battery technology. I'm wondering if you guys have heard about some of the new technologies that are being worked on by numerous companies, and if any of you are aware of that.
I am. We're pretty involved in battery storage, and there's a couple companies that are coming out with platforms right now that are supposed to be better than the Tesla. Right now, I think they're probably the best battery storage component out there. But Enphase is a company, first quarter next year, they're supposed to come out with a battery that's supposed to be 15 kilowatt hours plus and have a better platform. It's kind of funny, and it's good to see, because what is happening with our battery customers is now they're starting to turn themselves into energy managers, you know, where we're going back, giving them a call, and you know, what they're doing now is at night, if they see that they're consuming too much energy, they're shutting this off or shutting that off to conserve that energy. So they're really becoming energy managers now in their own home. And, you know, give it a couple years and couple that now with AI, artificial intelligence, they're going to be able to control their entire household with their energy, their lights, you know, car charging station, whatever they want to do. So that's where this the industry is definitely going. So it's good to see. It's good to be a part of, and we just see in the next couple of years a lot of customers becoming their own energy managers.
Thank you. Bill, do you have anything to add?
I have a lot of faith in technology, and as I mentioned before, it took 10 years for us to go from the horse to the car. I forget the name of the law, but there was a law that was stated maybe 25 years ago about computers. Computers that were increasing capacity every 2 years and decreasing cost at the same rate is going this way. The same is happening in the solar industry. The cost of generation is going down, and when batteries hit, they're going to hit, and it won't take long. I believe it's going to work.
Has anyone heard of iron flow batteries? That technology?
There's a number of different technologies out there, but they need to be worked out.
Yeah.
Batteries, you know, we really looked at them a few years back, and there was a saltwater battery that we really got interested in, right? Backed by Bill Gates and a member of his investment group. And some of the really great technologies that can handle Guam's climate and needs, they just couldn't get it to an effective or cost-effective, marketable to the masses. It just was so expensive that you couldn't do it, right? Now some of these other ones are, again, getting better and better, but you know, for the majority of what I'm hearing at this table, remember, I'm not primarily a solar provider, I'm an energy conservationist, okay? But I keep hearing companies that sell 20 and 25-year contracts to make it affordable for people to get into solar, say GPA or the government shouldn't get involved in long-term contracts because the technology is improving. So maybe there's something there, right? If we believe the technology is going in leaps and bounds, maybe we shouldn't be signing 25-year contracts, and maybe the general public shouldn't be signing 20 or 25-year contracts, because the same guy selling it to them says 5 years from now that everything's going to be way better, right? So in managing those kinds of things, right, as an energy conservation company, it's a cash and carry. You want to reduce your power by a light bulb, it reduces your power immediately, and you own it, and all the benefits that go with it. You change to a better air conditioning system, you own it. It's all yours right then, And that actually helps GPA without removing customers from a company that we need, right? When you look at the net metering, right? Yeah, batteries are great and stuff like that. We got to pay, Jeff said, $6,000 or $7,000 a battery for the ones that he offers, right? And you're going to replace them every 10 years, right? But then we have other guys, customers of mine, and I appreciate GPA for this, they give free storage, right? So it's got to flow together. If we can do the energy conservation and then some production, right? I mean, so far I've been hearing 200 megawatts. With energy conservation and 200 megawatts worth of renewables, right? We're already 85% of the island's need, and we're good.
Thank you. I'd like to, unless you had something to add, go ahead. Oh, yeah, what I wanted to ask is what are the future, what do you guys foresee as the cost of renewables in the future? Are costs trending downwards, or they look like they're going to increase, or they look like costs are going to decrease?
Our costs in the renewables are definitely going to decrease, I would say, from now to the next at least 5 years. I mean, that has been the historical trend, and that's what everybody's forecasting. I mean, we've seen modules go down, God, at least 50 or 60% in the last 2 years. So, you know, even with the scare of a big glut on the global market, modules still came down. So we're definitely seeing a decrease over the next 5 years.
Mr. Hagan, anything?
Correct. Modulars continue to go down. Some of the hardware does not change. The mounting, the racking, the people, the labor involved, that's probably going to go up as the wages go up, other materials go up. But the technology side is going to definitely go down.
Yeah, I think all of us 100% agree, right? On my side of the fence, right? You look at some of the most energy efficient air cons a few years back, you could buy 32 SEER for $3,000 for a 2-ton air con. That same one now you can get for about $1,600, right? You look at light bulbs. The most common light bulb on Guam is a 4-foot tube light, right? LED version 3 years ago was $21 retail market, right? They're now getting sold at $8. So you got a 65, 70%. So it's only going to get better as far as cost effectiveness. But we still need to remember that all of the technologies come at a significant upfront cost. And this goes back to Senator Castro's question earlier, what's slowing it down? Why aren't we moving faster? And it's just access to capital. Access to capital for guys in the industry, access to capital from the homeowner or from the business. If there was a way to speed things up, find a way as senators to put a program together that would help fund some of this, or low interest funding or something, so that businesses and homeowners could actually own it instead of just borrow it for 25 years. Because in the end, the biggest thing that's of the 2,000 customers that are out there, or net metering customers, is on a power purchase agreement. So they're really not going off the grid and not going anywhere. They're just trading money from one company to another, right? Those power purchase agreements that are out there are 15%, 20%, maybe as high as 25%. It doesn't matter. The customer, the homeowner, the business is still paying it. It's just who they pay it to, right? So they're not coming off the grid. They're not doing anything like that. They're just signing a long-term rental agreement.
See,
Maybe we
Senator,
gotta
I
help
disagree with that, because the power purchase agreements, they avail customers who couldn't afford or not affluent and can afford to buy those systems to save money from day one. So I'll disagree with that statement.
Jeff, you really disagree that you're trading money from GPA to...
Well, please, yeah, let's not get into a debate over that. Let's stay on track. So I do have really one final question that I have for everyone in the industry. Well, maybe more than one. So, well, let's start with this one. Are there any challenges that any of you guys face when dealing with government of Guam as far as obtaining permits, clearances for projects? Are there any challenges you guys face with that? None? We're doing a good job then.
Just general bureaucracy. I mean, there's not any big hurdles, there's just a lot of little bumps. It works.
And I actually think that it's gotten a lot better over the last couple of years. I really, as far as DBW, I mean, even GPA with the interconnection agreements, it's really gotten a lot better.
All right, that's good to hear. And when you guys interact with GovGuam officials, do you think they're generally knowledgeable about some of the technology you guys have?
No. I think we're all going to say the same thing, no. I mean, because this technology, even on the energy conservation and on the solar side, is going so fast, right? It's hard for a guy working a full-time job to keep up with changes in the technology, taking air conditioning tech. If he's not taking continuing education classes, right, he's going to get passed by. So you have guys that are great techs on old technology, but are not being forced to upgrade their knowledge with the new technology, and so sometimes it can make it challenging there.
Senator Castro?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you for the line of questioning earlier. Definitely have room in the Republican Party for you. In all seriousness, Mr. Chairman, that leads me to my question, a serious question. You know, we talked about some local incentives, the policy guidance you provided, maybe for greater investment in this market. But my question now is, are there any known federal policies that serve as an impediment, or that anything we can do to reach out to incentivize maybe less federal intrusion? Are there policies that make it more difficult for your market, this industry, to grow faster than it currently is?
Not on my side, not a federal impediment.
We love to see a battery rebate program put in place. So I know for electric vehicles there is, but it's for four-wheel. We love to see that changed.
I think a lot of states, right, like Florida, no matter what it is, Florida, any type of renewable project, they give 50%. But this is coming from the power authority down there, Florida Power, okay? Other states do other things, right? But it's all coming from, the federal gives your ITC your 30%, which is going to expire here shortly unless renewed, right? But then you have the states that are also giving some rebates, but then you also have their power authorities that are also contributing to this, right? Here on Guam right now, we don't really have that, right? We've got the federal side, which ends up being paid out of our coffers, right?
That's what I wanted to ask, that one question. By having installed solar panels, does the solar panel company receive a rebate or subsidies through the federal government at all?
The customer does. Now, depending on the type of contract that they sign with whomever their provider is, some of them trade that because it's useless to them, right? Because you have some lower income families that sign power purchase agreements, but the tax credit wouldn't benefit them. And so if they're making a deal with their solar provider that by giving you this, right, or transferring this over to you, we get a little better deal, some of those exist out there. But as far as the providers ourselves, we are not getting rebates by the feds.
Directly, so it's
Directly.
from the consumer.
Correct.
And you said something about expiring. Is this expiring soon?
It is, Senator. So it's 30% now, which is the ITC credit. Next year it goes down to 26 in 2020. 2021 it goes down to 22. 2021, 22, 2022 it goes down to 10%. And then the residential after that actually phases out, but commercial stays at 10%.
One of the other benefits on the commercial side of things, because the majority of our stuff right now is commercial, is bonus depreciation or accelerated depreciation. This is the last year of that additional 30% bonus depreciation, allowing businesses to sit down and take your standard 20% depreciation on a 5-year table and then getting an additional 30% after the tax credit. So it gives ROIs right now under 2 years, whether it's solar PV, energy conservation, those kinds of things, you can get those type of returns, but that will stop at the end of this year, right? And we don't have anything, and this is why I say money is really the bottom line. If we had a program that would help people conserve or help people move into the energy space, right? Without damaging GPA, because we need them, right? We have to have them, okay? They've got long-term contracts out there where we're long-term committed, right? And the more of us that don't use them, those that do have to carry that burden, right? So with that combination of in-between of energy conservation, some power generation, and GPA, we can really do amazing stuff.
All right. Now, another question I have is, what is, and you guys are kind of touching on it now, I think, actually. You sort of answered it. My last question was really, what's been the most difficult aspect of operating your business and of growing the industry? And you guys have kind of touched on, I guess, more support from the government in terms of subsidy. Are there any other issues that, or any other things you think could help your industry?
No, I think it's our industry is exactly what Bill spoke about, right? If you go back, and it's really any industry that's transfers over in technology. So the car industry, when Henry Ford first came out with the Model T, you know, we look at cars today and we think, wow, you know, look at this innovation. But that was a very hard struggle to get to where these cars were efficient, and even where the wheels, you know, stuck on the cars, right? If you take the cell phone industry, first cell phone came out in 1974. Really, it wasn't until the 80s when they started to become mainstream. So it took a while. Now you see our industry, which is starting to gain legs now and is starting to run. So it's something that we really need to take a look at this industry, as Mr. Leon Guerrero pointed out, and really say to ourselves, look, where are we going to be in 5 years? Where are we going to be in 10 years? Because even in the cell phone industry, it really didn't start spiking until you hit that 10% deflection point. Once any industry hits that 10%, it's gone. And we're not even there yet. So once we hit that, this industry is going to be mainstream. You know, I foresee in 7 to 10 years, you walking in a Home Depot, you know, and buying, you know, solar panels or buying whatever you want and going home and installing them yourself. I mean, that's how far this industry is going to go and how quickly it is going to go. So it's a scary thought to be sitting here saying, hey, let's go ahead and invest in something, you know, for the next, you know, 30 or 40 years that we're all going to be stuck to, when you got an industry that we're looking at that's moving so quickly. So I think that's the struggle with everybody right now. It's just we're not at that 10% deflection point, and we're trying to get there.
Thank you.
In addition to that, I think it's a funding. And we're in a market where we have lower median incomes, right? With fairly higher expenses than you would say in the mainland US, right? And so the discretionary money to invest for a homeowner or for a business may be less. And with a little bit of support, some way or another, then it could go faster. It could really, really move. It could really move.
I can appreciate GPA's problem. They cannot project the future. They have to deal with what's now, what's here right now. It'd be nice to be able to have a crystal ball and say that in 5 years we're going to have all the batteries and solar in place, but we can't. They need to deal with what's right here. And so I sympathize with John trying to figure this out.
All right, thank you. Anything else anyone from the panel would like to add in closing?
Senator, thank you very much for allowing us to speak today. Senators, appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, this roundtable hearing has now concluded at 10:35 a.m. Thank you, everyone, for your participation.